let's kind of pull on that dope thread a little bit, because you get onto the state, you survive the academy, obviously. So
yes.
you graduate, you get out, you start working. As you're working, we want to talk about now what leads you into doing drug interdiction. So obviously when you start off, you're with a field training officer, you go through your training phase, then you get out on your own. What kind of things were you doing initially when you were out on your own? How does North Carolina do it? You train for a while, then you're out, and standard, like what, traffic enforcement, work accidents?
Yes.
Pretty much. Is that what you were doing?
Change tires, go get gasoline.
Murph, I warned you, Murph. Don't go there. One of these days, we're going to be driving. There's going to be Murph on the side of the road. You going, hey, can you help me? I go,
help me.
no.
Hey, Steve and I have had many of these constant back and forth on this exact thing. But yeah, so when I graduated the academy, it was 20 weeks. Reported to my first duty station, and did have a field training officer. I actually
Where was that at?
It was in Asheboro, North Carolina, Randolph County, which is on the south side of Greensboro. It was about an hour and 15 minutes from where I grew up, but it was still within the same troop, which was, most state agencies have that similar structure where you have a troop and then you have districts within that troop. So that was my first duty station, and I had a primary and a secondary training officer, and went through, I'm thinking it was at the time maybe 6 or 8 weeks field training. And my primary field training officer, his name was Wayne Brumley, just a jewel of a man, wonderful training guy. And my secondary, his name was Tony Miller, who later he rose to the rank of major within the organization. He was a young guy who was been on about 5 or 6 years when I came on. So I had a good mixture of youthfulness as well as very veteran experience. And the shift I was on, it was similar type makeup. And so going into the field training office, having some of that law enforcement background, I had become pretty good at catching impaired drivers at the police department. And so it was a natural.
All the impaired drivers were at the police department?
When I worked at the police department, I should say. I apologize. But it was just something I thought, this is where I want to go. And and my training officer, he was one of the leading impaired driver troopers in the district. And he really focused and was successful with that. And he taught me a lot. But, in the beginning, doing the traditional trooper type efforts, that's what my goal was. I really enjoyed it. It's what I wanted to do. And, there's some funny stories in there. But one in particular that my training officer shared at my retirement luncheon, and he would share with you today, was this was just kind of an internal trooper agency thing. I don't know if you did this, Morgan, or not, but when you would encounter in the old days somebody whose license were suspended roadside or whatever, you would take their license there on the spot and you would put it over your driver's side window along the headliner there. Just slide it in there, or you'd keep it over your sun visor. And my training officer had tons of those. And it was just always something I remember Roger Smith having. So it was one of those little symbolic visuals that I thought, I want that. So I kind of set out on a mission, to see how many licenses I could collect roadside. And so I made a comment to my training officer at the time. And he said, they're more trouble than they're worth. You have to keep up with them. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. So he handed me a handful before I got out of training and said, here you go. Maybe this will help you feel like a real trooper. And so it was just one of those little symbolic things that I connected with. But in that, his nickname was Brutal Brumley. He was a former military guy, about 6 foot, 6'1", thin guy, was very physically fit, marathon runner, still runs today, and he's mid to late 70s. But he developed that nickname because of, some roadside encounters, obviously, through the courts. And I saw it in action during training. We stopped a gentleman for speeding one day, late evening. And the gentleman didn't initially want to cooperate. And this was when he had turned it over to me and he was just watching from a distance. And, trying to find my way through, this guy wasn't the most cooperative after a couple of requests. So next thing I know, my training officer commences to removing the gentleman from the car and how the gentleman wanted to cooperate. And this guy was twice our size. And so I saw firsthand in action, how he earned his nickname. But he was very fair. And anyway, when we got the gentleman under control and took him to jail, he had a long conversation with me about taking control. He said, "You cannot let anybody else get the upper hand on you out here. It's because of survivability." So it was a valuable lesson taught at the time, but, I seen him encounter so many situations where he showed a lot of compassion through accident investigations as well as roadside stops for different violations. And so he was well-rounded and gave me a good lesson. And but at the time, interdiction was not even in the culture of the Highway Patrol. It wasn't even thought about. It was just traditional trooper work. And the county that I went to had 8 miles of interstate, but where we worked was non-interstate. And so that leads me into, once he cut me loose, past all my training, I started, doing traditional trooper work. And at the time, when I joined the patrol, I kind of have to go back here. The patrol, the troopers that have, gotten killed in action, they kind of came in clusters, 2 and 3 at a time. And just before I joined the patrol, we'd had 3 members that were killed roadside, and 2 of those were on interstate highway. And where I grew up, we didn't have interstate highway, so I didn't have any familiarity to it. And so I was like, I don't want nothing to do with that. I just want to be a traditional trooper. But I was very proactive. I was finding a lot of stuff roadside. And, when I would make an arrest for driving when impaired, I took the time to go up and search the car. And if I found anything else, I was making charges. And so I kind of developed the desire to do that. And then in our patrol office one day, my secondary training officer, the gentleman I mentioned to you earlier who had been on less time, he had attended our first interdiction training course, which was taught internally. And I remember him talking about it. And for some reason, it just connected, I connected with it, the stories he was telling, the lessons that they were talking about. And when our agency started the interdiction effort, it was in partnership with DEA. And they had started the experiment on Interstate 95 down in Fayetteville. And the troopers that were working it down there had a lot of success. They were kind of the first generation interdiction troopers. This is, the mid and late 80s. And so a couple of gentlemen by the name of Chris Dew, who had our first K-9, and Terry Isaacs, who was really the one who was making a lot of seizures at the time, they taught that course. So anyway, he comes back to our district and is talking some about it, and it just captured me. And he had a bulletin that they had given him in at school, and it was an epic bulletin. It was a teletype that would list, seizures from throughout the country of seizures that made the threshold. And so I started reading it. And for whatever reason, it just connected with me. And that's how I began, pursuing the interdiction efforts.
Oh, I remember reading those teletypes too. Those were very interesting. You get the law enforcement officers killed summary, and then the teletypes. And but you mentioned something too. I want to ask you about. You said that they traditionally didn't work interstate. Is that just because of, like you're talking about, the danger, or was it because? See, it's kind of the opposite. A lot of troops where I was at, we had a lot of 2-lane. In fact, all of my stuff was 2-lane, and you would have killed to be up on the interstate where you thought all the action was.
Right.
Why did they keep you away from the interstate, or why did you stay away from the interstate? Just because of part of the danger factor, or something else?
Well, I think it was a combination of reasons. Again, going back to where I said I grew up, non-interstate, a lot of secondary roads. That's just what I was familiar with. And, those folks that had been like Roger Smith and a couple of his workmates, that's where they worked and built their reputation. And so, trying to follow that lead, I think that's why I did that. And my training officer, he worked some interstate, but he wasn't in the interdiction area. He was just, regular trooper enforcement. But that's the way he operated, was secondary roads. In that day, you were heavy on looking for impaired drivers. Then, looking for the under the influence drivers, especially on Friday and Saturday nights on evening shift. It was a lot of priority placed on that. And so just trying to fall in line and follow their lead, I think, is why I did that. And, but what I quickly learned was what the interstate did bring you was, if you were low for the week as far as, number of citations or activity that you had to turn in at the end of the week for the supervisor to see, you could go out there and with high volume traffic, you could quickly pick up on some of your total numbers for the week. And
now, wait a minute. Did the North Carolina Highway Patrol have a quota?
No, we did not have a quota, but I will say the supervisors did monitor your number of contacts per hour of preventive patrol. That's how it was worded. And you had better be in that district average of what everybody else had. So,
I had somebody ask me that one time. Do you guys have a quota? I said, no, sir. I can ride as many as I want. How many would you like today?
A good response.
Yeah. So that was kind of my introduction, and then with my training officer, my secondary training officer introducing me to that, it just kind of took, and so I started going out there and trying it, and having little success. Really didn't know what I was doing, but it was just a process of learning from there. And, I was a very proactive trooper. I, did a lot of high production, got a unmarked car at a young age, young in my career. And anyway, the next class came open internally. My then district first sergeant asked me if I would be interested in going. I said, yeah. And I remember sitting through that class with those troopers teaching it, and it just captivated me. That's the simplest way I could, as they were giving some of their case studies, talking about, what their findings were and some of the follow-up results. I thought that's what I really want to try. And so I came back and started trying to apply it.
So you started doing this. So what was your first big seizure? What's the one that cracked because you have to go. We started it. I was part of a 4-man team at that time. We started our interdiction unit. And so when you start off, you don't really know what you're doing. You get a few things here and there. We were working 54, which if you remember the Operation Pipeline report out of Epic, Highway 54 that came up out of Texas and Oklahoma and through Kansas, that was a major pipeline. They were making lots of arrests. So we started working that area. We were stopping everything in sight, trying to look for stuff. But you always kind of start off small. What was that watershed event for you? What was that thing that kind of cracked it open, that once you get that first one, it's like, I got this figured out?
Well, so this was in 1988. Again, it wasn't the culture of the Highway Patrol. It was just kind of getting started. And so there really wasn't a lot of information to pull from, or, a lot of guys saying, hey, let's go up and work this road and look for this. It was just kind of an individual effort, so to speak. And at that same time, one of the troopers I mentioned earlier on Interstate 95, Chris Dew, he had our first K-9 on the patrol, but it was just a narcotic dog. It was a beagle. And, some about that during the training, listening to him talk about, the role the K-9 played that interested me. So when I came back to the district, not long after that, request came through troop headquarters. Any troopers interested in having a K-9, submit your interest. So I thought about it, and I did. And the district commander at that time, or the troop commander at that time, who was very much old school, was not on board with this, but he was passing it along from patrol headquarters. When I submitted my name, he sent a message back that said, if you want a K-9, I think I can find somewhere else in a different place to get you a K-9 assigned to you, meaning, I'm going to transfer if you really want this K-9. And again, you got to understand the internal culture of the organization. So I said, no, sir, I'm not interested in one. So anyway, there was another supervisor who had been involved in the early stages of it. He said, I thought you expressed interest in this. I said, I did, but here's what I was told. And he said, I'll take care of that. And I was like, oh no, please don't get me in trouble here.
You're thinking, Lumberton, here I come.
You know what Trooper Cardwell just told me there, First Sergeant?
Yeah. And so anyway, next thing you know, I got word that, hey, if you want a dog, we'll assign you one. We're going to assign one to the central part of the state and one to the east part of the state. And you report to this K-9 school, which was actually in Greensboro at the time. And so we did. And anyway, the school was about 10 days, 11 days. Again, patrol hadn't had a program at that time. They were just starting to get into it. And so getting the dog really helped as far as going out roadside, learning what I was doing. And so I had made some phone calls to troopers that I had learned about on this Epic Operation Pipeline Bulletin. There was a couple guys that I kept consistently reading their names.
Was
Mike
one of them
Ralston.
a guy named, do you remember a guy named Jeff Faison out of Florida?
Yes. Yeah, I remember his name. He was kind of the first generation that was came along at the time, these other troopers I mentioned that taught us. And then there was some in the area, neighboring states, Mike Ralston in Georgia State Patrol, Benji Hodges, Georgia. And there were some others throughout the country, but I can't remember what it was caused me to reach out to Mike one day because I had, expressed interest in getting more training. But again, it wasn't the culture. So somehow I made contact with Mike. He worked north of Atlanta on Interstate 75, and where I worked was Interstate 85 and Interstate 40. And I just cold called him and introduced myself. And anyway, told him what I was seeking. He said, sure, you're welcome to come down and ride with me if you'd like. So I had to take vacation time because I couldn't get approval to go on patrol time. So I went down there and rode with him, spent my own money. And, he took care of me really good. He showed me a lot. And then I come back and we had another gentleman by the name of Ed Lowry who had worked on Interstate 95 in Fayetteville in our agency. I had gotten approval to go ride with him, but I had to take vacation time too. So I went and rode with him. And this was the watershed moment that you're speaking of. While riding with him on 95, he was kind of the hottest guy at that time, consistently making cases. And this was when everything was flowing out of South Florida, back when Steve was, he was familiar with all the importation through South Florida, where everything those guys were getting was Miami connected in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And I remember getting in a car with Ed, and he had just come off some days off, and he says, Bo, I don't know if we're going to have any luck. And that's what he called everybody, was Bo. I don't know why. That was just a habit of his. But he said, but we're going to go out and try. I'm going to see if I can get you something. Well, the second car that he stopped, it was like that epic bulletin, teletype, Operation Pipeline played out before my eyes. The second stop, he gets a four-door, I believe it was a Buick, old four-door sedan coming out of Miami, registered out of New Jersey, male, female occupant, and found a compartment built between a rear seat and trunk. And it had like 5 kilos of Coke. I thought I was seeing it play out before my eyes. And that was my watershed moment. I was like, this is what I want to do. I had been trying it up to that point with minimal success, but between him and Mike, it really opened my eyes to other things that I really had not been paying attention to, like human behavior, the importance of the interview. And anyway, so when I left from there, I was really energetic. And so I come back and started applying it. And having learned to operate my K-9, I started looking at things differently as far as my approach and how to talk with people and what to look for roadside interview wise. And so that first big seizure was a U-Haul that had come out of South Texas, which obviously still is today, but then the major source for our area, it was a U-Haul, and it had about 850 pounds of marijuana in it. And once I got that, I was hooked. I mean, I was hooked 100%.
Well, let's go back to that seizure of Coke. When you opened it, did you know? I mean, when you saw the bricks, obviously, did you know what it was at that time, or did you kind of have to go, okay, wait, I'm just kind of like, whoa, what is this? Oh no, I know what that is.
Kinda, yeah. I had never seen that kilo in person, and obviously Ed had, but I had not. I'd seen many pictures, and so I'm like, well, that's what it really looks like, I guess. So, yeah, it was a really good learning experience.
Now, so the 850 pounds of weed, that wasn't the case that you and I worked, was it?
No, this was a brother and sister. They had come out of San Antonio, and they were delivering somewhere in, I think, around Richmond, Virginia area. But it's an interesting story on that. We had not had that kind of seizures go through our court system. And when it went for first appearance the next morning, the judge who was listening to the probable cause hearing, he said, he pulled me to the side before the hearing. He said, now, from what I'm told, you can't do this. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, you can't make arrests. You can't just go in and start searching somebody's belongings. And I said, well, I didn't, sir. I said, they gave me permission. And he was like, what? And I said, yes, sir. He said, they gave you permission to search their truck knowing that they were carrying this? I said, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay. So, it was a learning experience for a lot of us, through the court process and,
I love the way the
myself.
judge was having um, uh, a a preliminary hearing out in the hallway before anybody was even sworn in.
Well, again, it's a small community, and anyway, everybody knew everybody, and I'd built a good rapport with this judge, and I just remember that conversation. And once I said that, he said, "Wow, can't believe somebody would do that." I said, "Well." He said, "Where'd you learn to do this?" And I told him, and he said, "So they tell you to ask people to search the vehicle if you think you're suspicious to want to look for something else?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "And they actually do?" I said, "Yes, sir, they do."
It's unbelievable.
It is.
And it goes back to your point you were making. If you understand human behavior, if you understand how to talk to them and set the right circumstances, I mean, even to this day, Murph and I were talking about it on our Patreon channel, but at the time, it was the largest seizure of cash in Kansas, but it was only $250,000. I mean, they've gotten much bigger stuff now. And people are going, they let you search the car. The guy, I remember to this day, his name is Brian Lacey. I looked at him, I said, now, is there, do you have anything that would be illegal in the state of Kansas? Guns, drugs, large amounts of cash. He says, no. I said, would you? And one thing I learned to ask was not, can I search? Because people always want to say no. I said, would you have any objection if I search for these items? And they would say no. Well, no meant yes. He even offered to show me, hey, I got a briefcase here. I opened up the trunk. There's the cash, and in his briefcase, plans for a methamphetamine laboratory. He had a marijuana press. It's like, you dumb son of a bitch. All you had to say was no, and we didn't have a K-9 at that point. There's not much I could have done.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's I was just thinking, Tim. Remember Dave Wilhelm with Customs?
Yes,
down in Charlotte, and he was murdered in Atlanta. So God rest him. But he called me one day, and I can't remember if it was Ashburn. I think it might have been Randleman. And he called and he says, "Hey Murph," he said, I got a tip. This trailer out in the country is some Mexicans are in there, supposed to be sitting on a big stash of weed. He said, "I need somebody to speak Spanish." So I met him down there. We took some people with us, and walked up to this trailer and I remember it was a huge lot with these big tall pine trees, but there were no limbs from 10 feet, 12 feet high before the limbs started. So you had this wide open, we think of as a killing field that you have to go through to get to that front door. But we have no reason to be pulling our weapons out, to go up, like we're going to do a tactical entry. We knock on the door and I get up there and use my Spanish and they're like, "Yeah, come on in." We go inside. I forget how many, 1,200 pounds of weed or whatever. They'd been using saws to cut it up.
Yeah.
But there was an AR-15 sitting behind the front door.
Oh,
I mean,
scary.
They could have pulled that, wiped us all out. But it's just amazing. They're sitting on the dope and they're like, "Sure, come on in."
Yeah.
And Tim, I don't know if you remember seeing this video, if it was a Texas DPS trooper, but he's on the side of the road and he's talking to this guy in that Texas drawl going, "Now, son, you got anything that's illegal? You got any?" Well, and so he's talking, and you can see it's the old dash cam. This kid's getting nervous. He says, "Now, do you have anything in the car that's illegal?" "No." And he's like, "Would you mind if I checked your car?" And this kid just vapor locks and passes out into the ditch. Yeah. And he goes, "Well, I'll take that as an admission of guilt."
Yeah, we actually had a couple folks pass out on us similar to that. But yeah, it's amazing. I couldn't understand it either. But I guess they just didn't want to seem like make any more suspicions.
I was just going to say, I was going to get to the next one because I want you to talk about the case where you almost got killed out there on the side of the road.
Yeah, let's talk about that, but lead into it. Let's kind of preface it by saying part of it's human behavior, right? How did you learn that part of it? Just through trial and error? Did you end up going through some training? Because look, the best interdiction people are the ones who can read people.
Yes.
And so how did you develop that skill?
It took quite a while. And where I learned it at was a series of training courses, but the one in particular that I give a lot of credit to was a gentleman by the name of Don Rabin, who wrote a lot of the interview and interrogation program for the state of North Carolina. He worked at our Justice Academy and was a law enforcement guy early part of his career. And that's where he spent, really focused on. He's a really smart guy. And he taught a course that I attended, interview and interrogation skills. It was just an 8-hour introductory course at the time. And but again, I think that's what really opened me to understanding the human side of it through the verbal and nonverbal cues of how to talk with people, communicate. And then after taking that initial course, I took follow-up training from him. And every time I left it, I was able to apply, different teachings from it. And, it taught me I was missing on comments that people would make strong cues. And, like if you'd ask them a question and they'd give you an answer, but they really wasn't answering the question, they were avoiding answering your question. And so that really opened up my eyes to understanding that. And then it was a series of just paying attention better and learning the importance of, one of the best communication skills is listening. And, and it's hard to manage that, especially at a young career, to where you get into those hyper adrenaline type, high adrenaline situations to where you think you may have something. That's easy to lose your wherewithal and not really listen and catch up on those simple cues that people were giving you.
Or the nonverbal stuff too. You mentioned that it's not what they say, it's how they act and what they do.
And I was missing all of that at my young age. And, it's kind of like information overload when I started it, when I had ridden with Trooper Ralston and Trooper Lowry and taken the training in our internal class. It was just information overload. And I was missing those important parts. And once I got introduced to them through Don, that's when it really started applying. That's the time where my light come on as far as, hey, I know what I'm looking for here. And it was much easier to identify.
Well, Murph, you teed it up. I mean, you can't. Now, where are we going to go from there? Well, let's tell us about the time you almost got killed. So,
okay.
And I'm not talking about the time you got out without your hat on and almost got run over by a, car. So, but obviously, this is a dangerous business. This is a dangerous sport. When you're out there doing interdiction, you got people who are, don't know what they're doing, but you got other people. You got cartel stuff. So, I mean, it tends to be a dangerous business, but.
Well, and like you've talked about before, Morgan, your backup could be 30, 45 minutes away.
Hell, I was only guy out sometimes for 4 counties. A lot of the sheriff's office weren't full service. I mean, you're out there by yourself. My first stolen car I got, my closest backup was 30 minutes away. I finally arrested the guy. I said, just get the hell out of the car, get on the ground, But let's hear about your story. So set the stage for this. Where were you? What were you doing? About what year was it?
So this would have been about 1992, I think it was. So I'll go back a little bit before, because it's important to say this that leads into this encounter. I had started getting successful on a more consistent basis with larger amounts. Again, I started interdiction in 88. And so through that several years of learning and starting to increase the frequency with when I was making seizures and the amounts that were involved, I had started learning more and could just understand what I was doing much better. And I remember sitting there after having, several successful stops with passenger cars and vans. I wanted to get into looking at tractor trailers, and there was very limited training on tractor trailers at that time also. And so I had started that. And
hey, let me ask you a quick question before you get into that, because you said you started getting better. Was it, so were you just making more stops and you're playing the law of large numbers, or were you getting better at identifying the things you wanted to stop?
Better at identifying, not what I was stopping, because I was a high volume traffic stop guy. I stopped a lot of cars. And, but I got much more proficient at understanding what I was looking for. And so what I mean by that, I got better was my search ratio to find ratio became much better. I felt like I was more proficient at understanding. And it seemed like when I would ask for permission to search, or if somebody refused and I utilized the K-9, it just seemed like I was finding it on a more consistent basis without, not finding anything. That's what I mean by that.
Give it to us in baseball terms. What was your batting average when you started getting really good at this?
I'd say I was hitting about every 3 out of 4, so to speak, some type of criminality. And it might not be to the level of a huge trafficking seizure, but I was finding some kind of criminality. And, this is one of the big teachers from interdiction itself. It's a really, how can I say, humbling effort. Because, you can put a lot of effort out there and not have the most results that you think you could. But what I found was when I was able to identify something else was going on here, a lot of times it might not be narcotics. It could be something as simple as some other criminality or somebody doing something immoral. That was one of the things I remember taking away and using. I later got into teaching. Was, you might encounter somebody who's a player that's not playing at the time, but they're mentally, they're guilty and they're displaying a lot of the same characteristics as if they had something, or they could be doing something immoral and you just happen to encounter them during that time period, because different people have different levels of moral, approach to life. And so a number of times I would encounter folks that were cheating on a spouse, or they were doing something else. They might not have it at the time. They may have just stolen something, but they didn't have it in a car. So,
were they locked in the back seat of a patrol car and couldn't get out?
Maybe.
Well, anyway, that's a good one. But so that's what I mean by I felt like I got more proficient at being able to identify when something was wrong, even though it may not have been narcotics, or they may have had a couple guns and they were trying to conceal them from you or whatever. But
what was the biggest giveaway for you? Was it verbal or nonverbal?
Both. You said something a while ago that I found that I was applying more than anything consistently, which was how they reacted when I would ask a question and how they reacted while they were answering it.
Yeah.
That nonverbal cue was huge for me. But as Don taught me, it was clusters of cues. One that by itself didn't mean anything, but when you started seeing clusters of them consistently, that's what
we used
you
to
need to pay
teach
attention.
When I taught interview and interrogation. That's what we looked at. Look at how they act right before, during, and after the answers, and that's what you're looking for, is a cluster of behaviors.
Yes.
Are they doing things to delay? Are they clearing their throat? Are they reaching down, releasing tension by pulling? For guys, number one clue for me on a lot of times was they pulled up their socks. You'd be interviewing them in a room, they'd have to reach down and pull up their socks.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times can you do that, pal?
Exactly. So anyway, through that time period, going back to the truck thing, I decided, I want to start looking at trucks, and I had no training on commercial vehicles. So, I kind of took the old approach that my dad did when he taught me how to swim, which was he threw me in, said sink or swim kind of deal. And so I just started stopping them and learning. And somebody had told me, if you really want to learn about the commercial industry, talk to a professional truck driver.
Weren't you stopping trucks, though, as part of your normal duties? We used to have to do truck checks. They would expect, do truck checks, check their logs, and do stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, you were already stopping trucks, though, right?
No. At that time, the patrol did not have regulatory authority.
That
was our Division Motor Vehicles Enforcement Group, which is what I mentioned earlier, part of our conversation. Through my career, they were then merged in with our agency. So they had regulatory authority, but we had none at all as far as the federal regulations. And so we didn't stop a lot of trucks. Occasionally you would encounter one, but for the most part, we didn't. And so once I got into doing that and learning about the industry, what norms were, and what was cost effective, anyway, I started paying more attention and trying to apply those principles and teachings from the passenger cars. And I started having some success with trucks. I'll never forget my first truck seizure was two guys that when I got permission to search, I had them stand out by the wood line and I was by myself. And this is an important point to make because that's what leads into the story. I had went into their cab and opened the sleeper curtain, and there was 4 U-Haul boxes. And they were so heavy you couldn't pick them up. Well, I cut it with a knife and saw it was kilos of cocaine. And so I immediately went out and arrested them. And, and it turned out to be, it was about 300 pounds of coke. And so that kind of led me down this path of, I started having more success with trucks, and some of the seizures kept getting a little bigger as far as quantity wise. And that's where, my interaction with DEA really started coming in more consistently, was they were coming out and responding to follow up and work these cases.
And taking credit and putting out the press release, just like the FBI, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that leads into, in that time period, that 4 to 5 year time period, I had a number of successes, encounters, and I had gotten a little brazen, a little bold, searching by myself. And a lot of times I had backup, but sometimes I didn't. So going to this particular case that Steve mentioned, I was working early one morning, and I had worked, it was an overtime shift. My shift at that time, I had started working on an interstate operation, which is a temporary assignment. My shift mates were off. And so I went out working, and very first stop, 2 cars passed me. They were originally speeding. And when they went past, it was a male 2 males in the front vehicle, and the second vehicle was a female with an infant child. I could see the car seat in the back. And they started changing lanes together and slowed way down. And I had clocked them at like maybe 10 over the speed limit. I think it was like 65 and a 55 or something. So I catch up with them and stop them, and both of them are rental cars. And so I get to talking with them, and they said, no, we don't know each other. We're not traveling together. But yet when I got the rental agreements, they were both rented same location, and the name that had rented both of them was the same, which was the passenger in the front car.
Duh.
Yeah. And so recognizing, hey, this may be.
Recognizing that as a clue.
Yes. And they were coming out of New Orleans, going back to, I believe it was New York. I thought, I haven't encountered this, but this may be a decoy escort type vehicle situation, because continuing to read those teletypes from the Epic Pipeline bulletins, I was seeing that more and more. And so being familiar with that trend, I thought, well, maybe it is. So I had called for backup, and nobody was in the area and was available. And so I went ahead and asked for permission to search. Yeah, you can go ahead. So thinking that, well, if it is one of these types of decoy type situations, the female may have it if she's transporting anything, and the other two are decoys. And so I got the key from her, had everybody stand off to the side, again, by myself. And I pop a trunk, and lo and behold, right there, duffel bags containing big block marijuana like we used to find, back in that era. And so I immediately go to them and order them on the ground. And the two males are hesitant, but the female, she starts crying. And so it gets a little chaotic. And they both finally go down on the ground. And I go, as we all do, you assess the situation of, okay, which one's the biggest threat to me?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, because standard uniform, right, is you got your pistol, ammo. I mean, what were you carrying at the time, revolver or semi-automatic?
We had just transitioned to semi-automatic shortly before this. We had traditionally carried the .357 revolvers.
That's what we had, the Smith & Wesson 686.
Yes.
But you only usually at that time too, you standard uniform, right? Carry one set of handcuffs. So you got three people, one set of handcuffs.
Exactly. And so, it was a lot of lessons in this. But anyway, the driver was the one that the vehicles were in the name of. The passenger, his name was not on anywhere, but he was the one that I assessed. If I'm going to have problems, he's the one I need to secure first. Because I had been in some scrapes before and done this, where I was able to, come out of it on the right side of it.
And one more quick question. I remember it took years before we got our first handheld radios, because we had to do everything on the outside speaker. Were you equipped at that time? Did you have your own handheld radio?
We had one, but I didn't have it on me. It was in the car. So again, this goes back in the old days of patrol, the culture, and, we've really advanced a lot from then. But so one set of cuffs, no walkie-talkie. I go to arrest him, and he decides he wants to, not cooperate. And when I go hands-on, and so we get into a struggle, and the other guy, he jumps up and he jumps into the struggle. So now I've got both of them that I'm tussling with. And so we just commenced to swinging at each other. And so I got to set the stage. My dog, he was in the car, and he was barking, and had a way for him to get out of the car if I was needed. He was trained to respond when he saw aggression.
So was he not just narcotics, but also patrol?
Yes, he was patrol and narcotics. So he was trained, to provide protection. So here I am tussling with these two guys, and I recognize I've got to get this under control quick, or this is going to go really bad. And I remember swinging to hit the guy that I thought was the most danger to me. And when I did, I swung so hard, I hit him, but it swung me so hard that my gun side swung around to him, and he kind of took his shoulder and pinned it up under my armpit, and he come out with my gun in no time at all. And when I recognized it, I thought, oh, this ain't good. And I hollered for a dog. His name was Lobo. I hollered for him. I gave him the command to come and, respond. And I realized I've got to separate myself from here, because this guy had full control of my gun, and the other guy backed off. And so I started backing up, trying to get some distance. And the dog came up, and as this guy was bringing the gun up towards me to shoot, he had accidentally ejected the magazine, which, that was one of the benefits of transitioning. At that time, you had that extra layer of protection with the safety switch. So he didn't hit the safety switch. He first hit the magazine eject. So that was just a little bit of short time frame there. That's, that allowed me to get a little bit more space.
And what kind of weapon was that? What were you carrying?
Beretta 9mm.
Oh, and I don't recall on the Beretta. I've got a Beretta Model 96, but it's a 40 caliber. I don't remember. If you eject the magazine, will it still function?
Yes. Yeah.
The one shot?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I thank goodness this guy wasn't very familiar with it. And so when he started pointing it up at me, it started trying to run, get some distance and zigzag. Well, the dog, fortunately, as he had been trained to do, he went and took him down. And, it's really funny when you encounter these type of situations, how you respond and what you think. But he did his job, and he allowed me to get some cover. And then, being worried for his safety, because I developed a strong bond with him, I called him off, and he was very obedient. So he come off of the guy. But he had taken him down enough, to give me time to get some cover. And so there I was, cover, and he come back to me, and these two guys get together, and they take off and run, get in their car, and flee. And so I'm like, oh boy, what do I do now? And so I did gather my wherewithal once I realized what it, was able to piece everything together. And I told the female, I said, you stay right here. And I took her keys, closed the trunk, and locked the door so she couldn't leave on the car. Because I thought, well, if she decides to flee on foot, it'll be easier to find her with an infant. And I jump in my patrol car and take off after these guys with no gun, but I get my shotgun out. And so I'm calling it in. And anyway, we were able to, I was able to follow them to the next exit where I saw them exit, and they went down a dead end road and fled on foot. And so I was able to pause everything there till all the backup got there, and we were able to capture them in the woods later.
Did they resist any with your weapon?
Yes. He had the weapon on him, and I'm sorry, he had dumped the weapon on the track. They brought the sheriff's office, who they were really good at manhunts. Some of the guys that I had developed a really good relationship with back in this day working in the county, we, in a rural county, we would respond. I would help them on calls, and they would, respond, helping me whenever the need was there. We used to scanner patrol because we couldn't communicate on radios. We had CB radios, and we would scanner patrol because we each had a scanner. And so these guys came in, and, they kind of put me on the sideline, so to speak, after, my supervisor chain got there and coworkers, and they went in and they found him, and they found the gun on the track. And anyway, they brought him out, and, we were able to get both of them, arrested, and one of them eventually cooperated and recovered the gun. So, it's about I'm a strong, faithful person, and that just increased my faith because I believe it was a guardian angel looking after me that day. And the way the cavalry got there so fast, and what I didn't know at the time helped, was there was a off-duty detective who was passing by on his way from home, going to work in a neighboring county, whom I knew. He had stopped in the median. He said, seen us fighting. He had stopped in the median, and he recognized what had happened, and he drew down on him and started shouting commands across the highway. And that's what caused them to decide to flee.
So you didn't hear that?
No, I did not hear that at the time.
Did you know he was? So you didn't even know he was there at the time, then?
I did not. So we're on the shoulder of the highway. It's a 3-lane highway in each direction, and he was in the median directly across from us. His name was Gary Llewellyn. And, he's the one that saw it, assessed it, and he got out and hollered commands and drew his weapon. And this was, when he realized that they had gained control of my gun. He had seen us fighting, and that's why he had stopped. And so that's what caused him to leave the scene. So, he was my guardian angel that day.
That's a man that'll never pay for another beer in the bar that you're at, right?
Well, trust me, he's near and dear to my heart, and we've had many conversations about it. And, he's a good friend.
And good thing Lobo did his job too, right?
Yes, he did. And, I didn't understand why he come off at the time, but Gary had told me, he said, well, you were calling him off because Gary was familiar with the K-9s and commands. And he was the commander for the department he worked in, which was a neighboring sheriff's office. He was the commander over their drug unit. And he said, well, you were calling him off. And I was like, I didn't even realize it. And I think what it was, I was concerned for him getting, shot, but he had done his job, thank goodness.
Dang.
Yeah. And so anyway, they were able to, we were able to get him incarcerated. And the whole rest of the story to it was they had went to New Orleans, the marijuana had been brought in on a ship at the port, and the guy who was driving was a diver, and he had went down. They had containers welded to the bottom of the ships, and he had went down and retrieved some of these packages, and then was taking some back along with the other guy. And the one that was the primary aggressor, he was he had been identified as part of a Jamaican posse, and he was the enforcer for that group. And the guy who cooperated, turned evidence against him, testified, said he had done quite a bit of successful enforcements for the group that he was affiliated with. And so, but we were able to get it into a federal court and prosecute him. So,
nice.
Yeah, it had a good ending to it, thank goodness.
So did the rat bastard, they ended up giving him some decent amount of time?
Yeah, he got a good amount of time, and it actually made federal case law at the time. When you use a weapon in the commission of a felony, it's a federal offense when you use a gun. Well, he didn't have a gun on him at the time, but when he was able to gain control of my gun,
he had constructive possession of a firearm at that point.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And so it actually made case law. And, not the way you want to make case law, but, there were some great lessons from that. And, which, of course, when I later got into teaching, that was one of my primary teaching points, was never search a vehicle by yourself. And
did you search a vehicle by yourself after that?
No, I cut people loose before I would do that. So, it was a moment that,
it's not worth a good guy getting hurt over a bunch of dope.
Yeah, there's no amount of dope that's worth you taking a bullet.
Yeah, and that's why it was so important for me to set the stage leading up to that, because it was a mentality behind it. I was having good success, and I was able to handle most situations by myself if I didn't have backup. And so you kind of become immune to your good officer safety skills. And so it was a quick reminder that fortunately I was able to survive.
Well, you putting on that, and I was guilty of it too. You put on that trooper uniform, you think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. It's like,
Yes.
And then you have one of those days where it's like, yeah, I don't think I am,
Exactly.
Reality, a really scary dose of reality.
Yeah. Oh. So, but yeah, fortunately it was a positive outcome from it. But that was a time period where I was really learning my craft, so to speak, and having a lot of good teachers, instructors that, set really good examples for me, helped me get to that point. And the thing about it was, every one of them had told me, don't ever search a car by yourself. But,
what did you do?
Search the car by myself. And so, you become immune to, the obvious.
All I can imagine is your training officer's hand outside the door going, "Ooh."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was definitely, something I don't want to repeat again. But,
and I'm sorry, we're running out of time here. Tim, we want to be respectful of your time, but Tim and I got to work so many cases together there, and just got to be such close friends, and families got to be close, and excuse me, going to cookouts, and the fact that part of the our listeners, our regular listeners, have heard us talk about it before, Morgan, where you become friends in law enforcement, you're friends for life.
Yeah. Yes,
and it's Tim and I, we probably talk maybe every 4 to 6 months.
Yes,
just catch up a few minutes, and then we bump into each other occasionally at conferences and things like that. But and just quickly, we got to talk about the North Carolina thing, and we'll just do the Reader's Digest version. It was my last job as an undercover agent, trying to buy weed off of these 2 West Virginia hillbillies that were living in Mount Airy, which everybody calls Mayberry.
Yes,
and we'd been through a lot of undercover meetings. It was 2 brothers. One was acting kind of decent, the other just acted real squirrely. He was the danger guy. And so when we finally got it set up, we had an informant. They were going to deliver, I think it was 400 pounds of weed.
Does this involve Kevin Black?
No. Well, if we needed somebody to crap his pants, we'd call Kevin. But we didn't on this job. We put a hidden camera on a U-Haul truck. Our informant went up with the bad guys on the Blue Ridge Parkway into Virginia, picked up the load. Now, I called Tim, and this was, obviously this was before we did a deal. And I said, here's the scenario. I'm at the Mayberry Mall. They're going to come across the state line on this road from Virginia. You got from the state line to the Mayberry Mall to develop PC for a traffic stop to seize that dope, because we want this case to continue. And you know what he did? He developed PC and stopped the truck before it got to me, seized the dope, squirrely guy comes screaming in the parking lot. Oh, the cops just got the dope, and they're all looking at me and I'm just cussing them out. Like, you guys set me up. One of you is a snitch. And I had the boss's Cadillac. You remember that old Cadillac that
Yes.
was it John Linton maybe had back then?
Yes, it was.
And I hit the gas when I spun out of the parking lot and I drove all the way back to Greensboro, which is about an hour drive. But that's the professionalism of these guys. They know what they're doing. You're in a slick top car on top of that, which means there were no lights on top of it. I think you had markings on the sides, right?
Yes, we did.
But, if you want to expound on how you did that, I'm in awe of what you did that day.
Well, so, I got to give a shout out to Murph. When he came to Greensboro, it's at a time when our relationship with the DEA was growing. And, but there was a few agents there that really didn't respond to our request in a way in which we had hoped. And when Steve came, he, new guy, obviously we want to give him a try. And I'm here to tell you, he responded with energy, with enthusiasm, and he went well above and beyond, not what we had traditionally encountered. And so he quickly became a fan favorite of ours. And then, we recognized the hillbilly accent being from West Virginia. That's where part of my family is migrated from, was West Virginia. And anyway, long and short of it is, he connected with us. He was very energetic, as I said. And so we grew a tremendous relationship with him, invited him in, doing the cookouts and so forth. So whenever he called us, we were quick to respond. And so to this particular incident, when he asked us to help, obviously we want to do the best we can. And so what he's not telling you was from where Mayberry Mall was to the state line was a distance of about a mile, if that much. Mile, maybe a mile and a half.
You got to be challenged.
Yeah, mile to a mile and a half, maybe. And so we needed, every inch of that. So I'm sitting there waiting, and he says, hey, it's on its way. And he gave me a description. So, this was a U.S. highway, 4-lane, but it was coming off of a 2-lane coming down the mountain. And so when it crosses the state line, I'm sitting there, and I tried to make myself as visual as possible. So when a guy sees us, he slows down, and he sees me, pulling across the median. And he's watching us so close. What he does is he runs off the shoulder of the road, about half of his vehicle. And I thought,
you're to maintain lane. There you go.
That's all I need. I think he may be impaired. So I was able to get him stopped pretty quick. And of course, the cavalry come in. All my coworkers, and we always work.
Wait a minute,
well
you waited
together.
for backup this time before you searched the vehicle?
Yeah, well, I approached him, but backup was very close by. Trust me. And so anyway, we were able to to proceed and get the weed and get him incarcerated. So, but again, going back to Murph, he was really good to work with, and whatever he needed us to do, we were going to try to help out as best as possible. So it was a successful case where we were able to help him because he helped us a number of times.
And so you mentioned Danville, Virginia a while ago, Morgan. So we just let this case ride for about 3 months. Didn't call anybody, just let things calm down. And the bad guys were so desperate to make money, they called me back. Now, they already lost 400 pounds of weed. Back then the price, I don't know, was probably $1,200 a pound, something like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, listen, we got another load that we want to do with you if you're still interested in buying it. And I said, yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I didn't get arrested, so I guess you guys aren't the snitches. And they said, we're not going back to Mount Airy. That's where they live. So we're going to go up to Virginia. So I thought we were going to Danville. We ended up in Martinsville, up where the Speedway is.
Yeah, which is just north of where I lived.
And back then, we called in, remember Charlie Wayne Moore?
Yes.
From Virginia State Police. He was with their Criminal Investigation Bureau up there at Virginia State Police. And I sound like I'm from New York compared to Charlie.
Some of them Southern Virginia boys, that accent, it's a different one too. I knew a guy from the state police called Mike Monroe. First time I ran into him at training, it's like, where are you from? I'm from Richmond, sir. Just the way they would do it. It's kind of totally different than North Carolina than South Carolina.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's how desperate these people are. They make stupid decisions. We're able to capitalize on that. But the whole point of this is two things I want to point out. One is that's what teamwork's all about. At that time we had 5 agents to cover, I think it was 24 counties or 26 counties, something like that in the Middle District of North Carolina. You had to rely on the state and local officers there, which was fantastic. And the fact that I was a local officer, that broke down a lot of barriers coming in as a Fed. And just like you and I say, Morgan, you can't have thin skin, and they're going to bust your pot chops. And you take it.
I know we did.
I took my shots when I could, and I still do on these podcasts. But the other point I want to make is the reason there's so many people from West Virginia that live in North Carolina is because that's as far as a tank of gas will get you.
That's a lot of truth to that. There's no joke. That's how my family ended up here.
Ran out of money. We'll just stay here, Gomer.
Yep.
Hey, now I got to tell you, now, obviously Mount Airy, we talk about Mayberry RFD, and I'll tell you, one of the best shows I think ever on TV, because Andy Griffith gave out some of the best parenting advice to Opie, Richie Cunningham, but I don't want to say was it a stereotype, but did you actually have a few guys like that, like Barney and Andy in some of your areas there?
When you go to some of the more rural areas, not to that level, but there was always a reference to that. And one of the things that one of my training folks told me, says, "Hey, use it to your advantage. Use the good old boy approach and charm, and make them think, that you don't know what's going on." And we did, and it was very successful. But in some of the more rural places, you had some that were probably lesser trained than others. And
did you ever run into a guy that carried his bullet in his pocket?
No, I don't think I ever encountered that.
I don't think I did.
Hey, look, I'm from Kansas. You wouldn't believe the crap I tell. Hey, did you date Dorothy?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Anyway, let me ask you guys a question. Can I pause just for 1 minute for a restroom break, if that's okay?
No, it's not allowed, man. Suck it up, trooper. No, hold on.
You don't mind.
Well, Tim feels better, and if Tim feels better, we feel better.
Absolutely right. Take care of our guests.
What did I tell you earlier at our age, our guys, we got to pee all the time. So,
hey, the age is catching up with me. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, so, and like I said, we don't want to give short shrift to stuff, but I mean, there's so many more stories, and it's like with so many people, we've got to, we'll have to revisit this, but let's do a couple minutes on what you're doing now, because what I think you're doing now is very important, and then we'll bring it to a close. But how many years did you have on the State Patrol when you decided it was time to file your paper?
I did 25 years with the state. And so when I retired, I go back, what I had mentioned earlier about when I started, just one, the same month that I turned 18. All that time counted. I was at the city for about 2 years and 8 months before I went with the state. And so with accumulated sick leave and going back and being able to use that time, I was able to apply to get a full retirement at 46 years old with 30 years and 2 months of credible service.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you didn't leave law enforcement, did you?
No. I stayed out about 4 months when I retired, and then went to work for the sheriff, which had later became the sheriff in a county that I was the first assigned in, Randolph County. And he told me, he came to my retirement luncheon. He said, "If you don't have any plans, let me know." He said, "I got a job for you." And at the time I had, through my career, I had been doing a lot of interdiction teaching, and I thought I might go in that direction. But this was an opportunity came up. He offered, and the DEA RAC in Greensboro at the time, Wally Cerniak, he had expressed interest in, me coming to work there. I had started a freight interdiction program towards the last part of my career, and he expressed interest in, having some involvement with that. And so that's what I did. Stayed out 4 months, went to work Sheriff's Department, was assigned to DEA in Greensboro, and worked there for about 4.5 years as a task force. And I got to tell you, I was a kid in a candy store at that time. I was pretending to be Steve Murphy Jr. And I'm just here to tell you, through my career, I was always impressed with the DEA folks, as well as the ICE HSI folks. And but Steve was one of my heroes, and I mean it sincerely. I just always looked at him, as a success story, and I thought, I'd like to experience what he gets to experience on that side of it, because I'd done the interdiction uniform side, but I hadn't got to do the other side of it. And so, coming out of uniform, clean shaven, no facial hair, clean cut uniform. First thing I did was grow a beard, wear blue jeans and a T-shirt, and drive a Cadillac. And I was a kid.
Hell, there you are, junior DEA agent right there, man.
I was, yes.
Well, the problem was he was addicted to cocaine, just in a different way.
I'm telling you. But, that was a really fun part, after retiring, getting to go do that. And so I did that about 4.5 years, and then that led me into private industry through some of the freight contacts I had developed in the freight industry, doing freight interdiction. And I went to work as a security investigator for one of the national carriers. Did that for a couple of years. And then 6 years ago, that led me to this position that I serve in now. So,
which is, can you say what it is?
Well, you're clean shaven and dressed up, so it's got to be something reputable.
Well, it is. I now work for HIDA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. You guys are familiar with that. Well, HIDA years ago had started a national initiative called Domestic Highway Enforcement, and it's known throughout our law enforcement community as DHE. And the gist of it is it's a information gathering and sharing program. We have a platform where we have a network of officers, analysts, investigators from coast to coast at state, local, and federal level. We communicate with them on a regular basis. And the cool part to it is some of the folks involved are people that I met back in the late 80s and early 90s are involved in some capacity, to include some of your old coworkers at Kansas HP, BK Smith, Kirk Simone.
I know Kirk. Yeah, he was actually one of the most effective people. He took the interdiction program to a new level with KHP.
Yes. Well, he's still involved in an asset forfeiture level, being retired now, but knowing those guys through the years, and there was many others, like I said, I came in on the second wave of generation for interdiction guys. And so through that teaching, I was able to grow the network at the different levels and to the third and what I call fourth generation. And so I get to communicate with all those old folks like me, to the young guys, to the 1 and 2 year, 5 year guys now, and being able to be involved and communicate with them through, through this common topic of interdiction is really cool. So that's what we do. I have a colleague, Mike Snyders. He and I met as young troopers in the early 90s teaching interdiction. He was one of their top getters at the Illinois State Police. And he's my colleague. He's a national coordinator, and I'm the deputy national coordinator, but he rose to the rank of colonel. And so he's got a really storied career, really wonderful leader I enjoy working with, learned a lot from him, a very intelligent guy. He leads our effort. This national initiative, it's about gathering information and sharing it with interdiction guys nationwide. We have what we call swaths of interstate that we title corridors. And we host about 75 to 80 calls a year, just talking about interdiction tactics, trends, concealments. And, we get to do it at the national level. And it's a really fun job to be able to do that. And we do other things, but that's our primary foundation. And I was on a call for about an hour and 20 minutes just before coming on with this one. We did the Interstate 10, 20, 40 corridor, and we had the U.S. Drug Czar as a guest speaker on ours. HIDA is situated under the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And so the presidential appointed drug czar is obviously the primary boss of it. And so he was a guest speaker on ours today. And once he spoke to the group, we had about 115 on a call. We then had a number of troopers and investigators and officers coast to coast talk about seizures and what they're seeing trend-wise. So that's fun. And it's a good way to kind of, see the other side of the career as I, work towards retirement years.
Well, and here's the thing is with you've got the credibility. You went out there and did it. So when you speak, it carries so much more authority because these guys know, hey, this dude's been out there. He damn near got himself shot on the side of the highway out there. And it just gives it so much more importance and impact to have somebody that's been there and done that than maybe have an academic come in and say, well, this is what you need to do, but they've never pulled a car over in their life.
Yeah, the 1 week wonders, they go out to one training course, they come back, and all of a sudden they're the experts. It's like, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah. And so, to echo what Steve says, that's the folks that we communicate with. They are doing it real time. It's so funny. I get some mileage out of it, but, haven't taught any courses since I started this job. But what I've found on the backside of my career is a lot of these guys that I was teaching courses to the guys that are having success today, they had just been born when I started this.
Oh, gee.
And, it really kind of, it kind of highlights, the age, but it also highlights something that has a lot of meaning. That is how long I've been doing this and being involved. And, it's really fulfilling to be able to do this, just to be able to still communicate. And we highlight to the leaders, the HIDA directors and ONDCP representatives, to include the drug czar, what good work is being done out on the highways by these young guys and, middle-aged guys. because they're doing some awesome work. The amount of fentanyl and cocaine that they're taking off on some of these stops is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's.
We could, like I said, we should just do a whole thing about, the trends or what we've seen changing, because obviously fentanyl is a game changer, in so many different ways. Well,
yes.
First of all, this is us saluting you, Trooper.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
And I join in that, brother.
And my salute to both of you. You guys have had storied careers also.
No, not really. All I did was save the world. Murph goes down to Colombia and Pablo turns himself in. That's his claim to fame.
What else did you need?
Yeah.
What can I do for you?
Yeah, exactly.
You still got your campaign hat? You still put it on every now and then and look in the mirror and go, "You one badass son of a bitch."
I still have my campaign hat, and I do occasionally put it on. That's for sure. Yeah, I do. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yep.
It's been a great career. It really has, and I still want to do this several more years. I'm 59, and Haida is a great place to be. We kind of refer to it as Switzerland. We could work with everybody. And that's the best part. I'm a big relationship builder and guy. I just believe in it and information sharing. So I did this throughout my whole career. And so to be able to actually get paid to do it now, it's like, man,
it's like you're paying me to do this? Well, hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so to be able to come to work and get paid to do this, it's right up my alley. So, but yeah, it's a lot of good work being done. And, a lot of credit goes to Steve. Again, he's top shelf in my books. So I appreciate
you very much. I feel the same.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, keep up the good work. We're going to come back to you for more stories. We want to see what's going on. You two don't go anywhere. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. I'll tell you, the most polite man, and this is a guy, we don't really have people will drop a few, F-bombs or say a couple things. He is the most polite gentleman I have met in a long time.
He was like that when I first met him, and he still is. He even called me after we finished the interview. Was yesterday, right? We interviewed him yesterday. He called me last night. And believe it or not, this man is 6'4". He's one of those guys that he is so nice, you never want to tick him off. Because I've seen him get upset with people, and it's not a pretty sight. And he called last night, and he said, I was so nervous. That's the first podcast interview he's ever done, believe it or not. I mean, with all his experience and the calls they do on a regular basis with his job. And he said, do you think I did all right? I said, Tim, just wait, man. You're going to get all kinds of good reviews on this. People are going to love you. So, and there were stories that we didn't even get to tell,
we have so many guests. We have to go back and do 2 or 3 episodes. Cause like with Tim, I mean, just the story. It was good we got to the story about the guy taking away his gun, because that's real life. I mean, and had it not been for his dog, bad shit would have happened to him out there on the side of the road.
Yep. And here's one of the stories he didn't tell you either. Lobo, his dog, after when Tim retired, the dog retired with him, became a house dog, and somebody stole him out of their yard.
Oh my God.
I don't know how you do that, because he was also an attack dog, not just a drug dog. He was an attack dog as well. So. But either that or they killed him and took him. But, he lost Lobo.
Damn.
I know.
Well, we're going to I'll tell you what, personal mission, we're going to find out who the hell did that.
Yeah. I tell you what, I wouldn't want Mr. Tim Cardwell coming after me.
He's going to be nice, but he's going to punch you on the top of the head and make you about 3 feet shorter. So.
Ooh. He's just outstanding, just an outstanding police officer, outstanding individual.
And just a good guy. And you could tell too. So, But anyway, if you guys like that, head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars for us. Remember, Stitcher's gone away. Google's gone away. So get on a platform that will be there forever. I don't know which one that'll be, but it's definitely not going to be those two. So hit those 5 stars. Head on over to GameOfCrimesPodcast.com for more information about the show. We'll be updating it on a regular basis. We got a guest coming out. The episode following this, the gentleman has a book, so that's going to be listed there. Follow us on that thing called social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, our Mafia Queen, Sandy Salvato, who rules with an iron fist and a velvet glove. Get on over, just put in Game of Crimes fans on Facebook, answer a couple questions, and be admitted to the inner sanctum, and you too will enjoy all the benefits that come hitherto and therefore forthwith with all of that stuff.
I was wondering how more of those big words you're going to throw in there. Hey,
I don't.
go, if you want a good laugh, go to that website, man. The fans in there are always putting funny stuff on.
Oh yeah, and they're dogging us too. So every now and then I get shit about Notre Dame, and so we're gonna have to have a day. There will be a day of reckoning, people. There will be a day of reckoning.
Oh, did you see West Virginia play Houston last night?
No.
Oh, they were ahead. Going 3 seconds left in the game. We're ahead by 3 or 4 points, I think. And Houston threw a Hail Mary and got it. We lost by 3. And that was the coach in Houston is the former West Virginia coach, Dana Holgerson.
He knew where you were weak. Couldn't finish.
Yeah, I went to bed with tears in my eyes last night. Come on, Mountaineers.
Come on, ears. All right. Well, game days will be Saturday. We'll see how the Irish do in honor of Frederick Nicolosi. Go Tigers, whatever the hell. All right.
Go Tigers.
All right. Go Cajun Tigers. Anyway, guys, so just have some fun. Also, hey, make sure you go visit us at Game of Crimes. No, well, that too, but visit us at patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We got a lot of good stuff coming out, a lot of content. We put more content out on Patreon than we do in our free podcast. So join us there for You Can't Make This Shit Up 911. We do Q&A. We do the Narcometer review. We've got Case of the Month. So we've got all sorts of good stuff for you to enjoy. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. So, Murph, just has been another exciting episode, don't you think?
That's absolutely. We get a lot of comments especially from law enforcement friends, like, you guys, that podcast, you have the best guests on there. And it's because of our listeners. As long as you guys support us, we can continue to get these kind of guests. So we're honored to have every single one of them on there. And we've got a couple special ones coming up here soon.
Yes, we do. And you're working on it. We're narrowing it down. So guys, we got some special stuff, but guess what? Thank you guys once again. Episode 120 for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and North Carolina friendly game of all, the Game of Crimes.